Welcome to your 10-Minute Manager Toolkit. Today I'm giving you some solid advice. We're going to talk about a topic that comes up all the time, that it's not going to be full and comprehensive, but here's some stuff you need to know and be aware of when it comes to the question of resignations. So let's talk about that. Let's go. A little legal disclaimer at the top here. I'm going to talk about a couple of things that are a little bit legalistic. The purpose of these podcasts is it's educational and it's general, and I can't talk to the specifics of any case that you might find yourself in. All I'm really doing is pointing out that this is where trouble might lie. So short version, legal disclaimer, this is for educational purposes only. Some of these podcasts, I'm quite abstract, I'm allegorical, I'm in-depth, I'm thinking about complex ideas and hopefully prompting you to think about them as well. Sometimes I just need to explain stuff to you. We just need to do that brain-to-brain transfer. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to talk about resignations. So let's go. Part 1, accepting a resignation. So here's the broader idea when it comes to resignations. Employment is a contract that is theoretically unlimited. Unless something happens, employment is deemed to be infinite. It will go along until such time as someone quits, someone gets fired, or somebody dies, or the company goes out of business. So it is this assumption of going on forever. We're going to do fixed terms another day. So what this means is that we can't work for someone until we die. Therefore, we have to have a right to leave. Because if we don't have a right to leave, that's slavery or indentured servitude. The employee needs to have the right to leave. An employer needs to have the right to leave, although there is much more onus on them to do that in a fair and reasonable way. So there's two things that come out of that. One is that the employee needs to say that they are leaving. And the question is, how much notice do you need to give is an interesting one. There is, generally speaking, no minimum legal statutory requirement of what notice ought to be. There are generally contractual obligations to do so. So if we start with this assumption of infinite employment, but a universal right to leave that, then quickly we come across the myth of accepting a resignation. I don't know where this myth comes from. I don't know where its origins are. I suspect the military, where you have requirements, you have commissions that have to go on for X amount of years. But in employment, you can't not accept a resignation. That is their right. This accepting the resignation is a little bit of a myth. It's a bit of a false option. At most, all we're really talking about here is if someone fails to give their contractually required notice period, then they are in breach of the contract. You could potentially litigate for that breach of contract. It's unlikely, but you might want to bring it up as a counterclaim should things end up a bit messy. We don't have the capacity to say, no, I don't accept your resignation. What we essentially are talking about is acknowledgement of the resignation. Essentially, we are documenting that we have responded. But do we even need to do that? Not really from a legal point of view, often from an internal compliance point of view, often from a payroll point of view, often so that we just have a record of what's just happened. Now let's talk about another interesting question about accepting or acknowledging resignation. So there's two interesting things that we tend to see. Hopefully you'll never see this. One is the heat of the moment resignation. Part of the reason in these podcasts is that I want to give you a series of red flags. One of those red flags is a heat of the moment resignation. This is one of those, if this happens, hit the big red button because this is complicated. Once in a blue moon, and I have seen this happen, both within a team that I was in and happens in the workplace semi-frequently, people resign in the heat of the moment. F this, I quit. Mic drop, storm out of the room, leave the building, they're off. These things happen. This might happen to you once in your career. Hopefully you're not going to be that person who does that. But once in a blue moon, someone will just figuratively, but potentially literally, toss their toys and quit. So what does this mean? We don't have a right to say that that was a right or wrong decision. What the courts have made it really clear to us is that we can't snatch that and hold them to it. We have to provide them what's called a cooling off period, where essentially they've made this emotive decision. Is this really what they want? Or is this just a heat of the moment, spontaneous, irrational decision? We can't say, oh no, you've quit, you've said the magic words, no takesy backsies. Therefore, what the courts expect employers to do is not to take that as a binding decision. There has to be a capacity for the employee to walk that back. What does this mean in practice? Essentially, if the person resigns and leaves, you don't have to chase them, but on the other hand, you can't put all their stuff in the box and leave it by the door. This is not the end of the story. They may come back the next day, they may apologize, and you have to presume that that resignation never happened, generally speaking. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that you can't take umbrage with the behavior, particularly if they've sworn at a few people on the way out. But on the other hand, you can't take the words, I quit, as binding and gospel. So let's pull on that thread even further. What if it wasn't a heat in the moment decision? What if they didn't change their mind in a reasonable period of time? How long and how much can an employee turn around and say, oh no, actually, let's pretend that never happened? We see this every so often. Someone will resign to go get another job, or they came up with plans, and then they turn around and say, oh no, I'd like to take that back. Well, if you've done a thing, can you undo a thing? It's a unilateral act. You have this right to pull this lever. Can you unpull it? Can you say, oh no, that never happened? Can you say, oh no, I've decided that I still work with you? Now, obviously, if someone quit and they have left and 3 months later they decide that they want to re-engage with you, that's not going to happen. But can they do that within their notice period? Short answer, circumstances may be different, but generally no. If someone has tendered their resignation, they've taken that action. They can't pretend that that action never happened, and the employer is not obliged to erase history. They can say, no, well, sorry, you've resigned, you've made your decision, you've ended the contract. Contract's ended. I have another big red flag to talk to you about. That is, don't ever ask for someone's resignation. In New Zealand, and probably most Western law, we have a concept of constructive dismissal, where someone can take their employer to court because they were forced to resign. Like, yes, they resigned, but they were forced to do so. There's 3 reasons, we won't go into them, other than to say the first one is, oh, well, I was told to quit. That, to any employment lawyer, is leverage, irrespective of the case. If the employee says, they told me that I should quit, and that's true, irrespective of the context, the lawyer will say, oh, okay, well, we've got something here. So short answer is, never tell someone that they should quit, never imply that they should quit. If anyone says, well, should I quit, or I'm thinking about quitting, your answer needs to be, well, look, that's your decision, that's for you to decide, that's your call, park it to one side and move on. You don't want to engage in the question of whether or not they should resign. And here's the final thing I would say about resignations. If someone holds up a store with a gun, has a gun for the purpose of robbing it, what essentially is happening is the person is saying, I have this tool, and this tool means you have to do what I want you to do. I have a tool that exerts control over you. It's like a magic wand. It's become a social construct. A gun is not a weapon in which we intend to harm people. It is, in practice, a tool by which we assert control over others. People have used and will use the threat of resignation like a gun. I have this tool, I will use it to control situations, and I will drop threats either idly or directly that if you do not do what I want you to do, then I will do this thing, I will pull this trigger. People will pull out their resignation as a threat to attempt to control their employer. This is how I want you to think about it. It's only a tool if we accept that it's a tool. A person with a gun, we know that it's a gun, but if they turn up with their finger in their pocket pretending that's a gun, it's only a threat that can control us if we accept that premise. If someone is threatening you with resignation, either by implication or directly, what they want is their way. We don't want to give oxygen to that tool, to that threat. And the short answer is, well, if that's what you want to do, that's up to you. But in the meantime, we still need to do things these ways. You don't want to give credibility to that attempt to control. Final thoughts on resignations. Nothing lasts forever. All employment will end. Almost everybody will resign one day from whatever job they're in. The job that you are currently in, you will resign one day. You will write that resignation letter. People want to leave on a high with good memories. Managing resignations delicately and carefully and with respect and with manner is a good way to make sure that employment ends well and quietly.
That was long, so let's make this quick. Thanks for listening. Have a look at our websites, Managingmedical.nz or Managingtradies.nz. Alternatively, check out my other podcast, Your 12-Minute HR Lesson. Otherwise, I'll catch you next time.